Like, at least the Twitter statement seemed like, "Hey, we're going to force you to buy this no matter what." That leaves like a bad taste in my mouth after reading that. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong though, but that's a weird kind of. Hopefully, that's just what Tyler said, just ceremony.
Where's the I mean, there was a considerable outcry from Twitter team members saying they were going to resign and yada yada yada, and even tearful, presence at the all hands meetings and etc. Where are those people now that in voicing their thoughts about Elon not buying it? I
I
imagine.
think these are different constituencies, Tyler. There's
Right.
the shareholders and the board that has a fiduciary responsibility versus the employees and the general population, right? The general population, if you wanted to be super skeptical, and there are people that voice this opinion, you know, Elon Musk has taken two giant bites out of his Tesla position in order to liquidate stock without causing what would normally be a massive issue if an insider sold 20 or 20 billion odd dollars worth of their core position. It's extremely difficult to get liquidity from if you're a founder. And so there are those people who think that this is really part and parcel of him playing those sorts of games. And so this is really about regulation. This is about how the SEC treats these sorts of things and about legal contracts and what they mean. You can't run a marketplace if people can run roughshod over the rules. And we've seen this before from Musk, who doesn't care about the rules, and we've seen this from other market participants in Silicon Valley with the recent Guardian news story about Uber and their behaviors. So the era of taking advantage of the markets and then running meme campaigns, which is what happened here, needs to be enforced in some way. And so the investors, the shareholders, who only care really about getting value for their money. They don't care about Twitter and free speech, etc. They care that they were made an offer that was with a fairness opinion from Goldman Sachs at $44 billion, and the richest man in the world should be relied upon to follow through with his legal commitments. And that's what the shareholders care about. So, the fiduciary responsibility under the law for Brett Taylor and the board is to the shareholders, not to former founders.
Okay. So we haven't done the top tech story yet today. Let me.
I wonder if Bill Gates is, getting all excited about potentially having shorted Tesla stocks. So I wonder if he's pushing any sort of agenda or statements of that sort to help this Twitter deal crash.
Okay. So the
Tesla
top.
shareholders should be nervous.
Yeah, he's not like that. He doesn't invest in that way.
Okay. Here we go. The top story today is that a trove of more than 124,000 internal Uber documents have been leaked. They range from the years 2013 to 2017, and they reportedly reveal management discussions and lobbying efforts during the company's aggressive global expansion. More than 124,000 confidential
I
documents.
mean, the documents are clearly incriminating, and clearly they advocate breaking the law all over the world. In the UK, they also show that Macron was complicit in trying to solve a problem in Marseille. These documents are, just show the level of basically corruption that exists at the heart of this Silicon Valley darling that has been subsidizing loss making, for a very, very long time. And part of the clear up was the removal of Travis Kalanick and the ability to create plausible deniability for the management around these bad behaviors. And that's the reason they brought in Dara Khosrowshahi, who had been at Expedia and done a very good job in tidying up that business.
And what?
Didn't we
What?
know that? I mean, we all knew that at the time. We knew that Uber was having trouble, especially in Europe, displacing cabs and all sorts of things, and doing, like doing things with municipalities and paying bribes.
Absolutely.
it was publicized at the time.
And this is the disgrace of it. It was all enabled through the capital, and they have good details in the Guardian article about the strategic investors who were brought on board in order to buy off the system. And this is, ultimately what the fight is all about, is that if you have asymmetric capital, as Andreessen does, and those who were in Uber early were able to access capital from large scale, usually limited partners who are pension funds and endowments. That's where they get their money from, and that those monies are invested in order to subsidize 40 cents in every dollar of every ride. They basically were there to destroy the incumbent taxi business, whether that's a good business or not, whether it was the right policy or not, with the medallions and everything else. These were community owned businesses, essentially, the medallion businesses, and they drove them all out of business by using asymmetric capital. And that's what we have to look at, is that the future we are going into is where there is total asymmetry of capital. It's either the state or it is corporations who are effectively regulated by the state. And again, I'll repeat, Adam Smith's invisible hand was talking about corporations skewing the political classes. And this is what this document clearly shows, and that everybody's in on the game except, guess who? The general public.
And move fast and break things was the darling model of Wall Street. And now that this and other revelations show that things include the law and basic ethics, does this portend the end of move fast and break things?
Well, Benjamin Graham noted that in the short term, stock markets are voting machines, and in the long term, they are weighing machines. And the move that people are talking about is from unicorns to what they're calling zebras, which is where actually these technology companies have to actually be profitable and have to be able to be funded not on the future network effect value. So there is some movement around that era maybe dying. And the zero interest rate policies that made for that era are dying because interest rates are moving up to 4% here, 3.5%, 4% here by the end of the year.
And that's the
Nickel,
Goldman Sachs model of valuation, right? That your current value is your earnings multiplied by your future value, or something of that effect.
yeah,
No,
but they don't
no.
have a,
Generally speaking, those models are worked on the basis of your growth rate and
yeah.
the addressable network value. So the capture that you can make, and then your ability to extract rent from that network effect is the general valuation process.
Oh, okay.
Nicholas, Ken and I have been had a breakout room just discussing the philosophical question is, are Lyft and Uber systemically important transportation infrastructure? Would they receive a bailout should the environment for that zero interest rate shenanigans, this carry trade, um, if it were to come to an end, would they get a bailout?
You know,
I don't
they
think so.
would they would have to because they have destroyed the taxi business. But on the other hand, I went through the period of using Lyft and Uber all the time, and I just have stopped. It's too expensive now, and the market chooses that. You know, the market will decide whether
That's
Uber
exactly right.
So do you
lasts or
They,
not.
ed?
the one innovation that I loved about Lyft and Uber was riders rating drivers and drivers rating riders. And if you could overlay that innovation on top of something that in some respects resembles the old medallion model, there might be a sustainable business with better service. Because I mean, I've been using cabs long enough to have dozens and dozens of horrible experiences with traditional cabs, and only one ever out of hundreds, if not thousands, of lists in Uber. So there's something in the business model that tech allowed that led to improved service, if not profitability.
Well,
The model that is going to work, and the model that they were always aiming for, was to have automated cars that didn't need drivers. So the whole process was one of marginalizing the drivers, and the drivers went from being 80% of the ride to 70% of the ride to then hourly paid workers, and the quality of the rides obviously diminished as the network expanded. But agreed, these were better than many of the incumbent situations. I'm not advocating for the incumbent situation necessarily as the best answer. The final position that we will be in is that we will have cars as a service, or, I don't think Uber needs to survive. I don't think Lyft needs to survive. If you imagine that you can have a car that has a digital identity, which is their VIN number, you have the ability to prove that the car is of good service, that you have a driving license, for example, if you are the driver, and that you can participate in a network that is verified and proven, and that you can join the network and drive your neighbors around if you wanted to. And finally, when you do have automated cars, you will have, Uber as a service, which your car can be contributed to. This is what I think Tesla would be, is naturally working towards, is that you buy a car and it goes to work for you when you don't need it, and it provides you with additional income where you've purchased the capital equipment and you service the monthly leasing fee,
How far do
but
you
the
think
car
that is
can go
away?
out and work for you.
How far do you think that is from actually happening, Nicholas? Like the actual taxi service? Hey, my car's going to drive around by itself, because I don't think it's going to happen within the next 5 years.
I agree. The problem that you have with all of these new models that they were hoping for, and this is why you've got a gap between the network effect, buying the network effect, and then having automated vehicles, is that the legal position of who is responsible when that car goes out. Are you, the owner of the vehicle, responsible? Is the Tesla, the maker of the software, responsible if it were to hit somebody or to be in a crash? Or would the service be liable? And so the thing that holds up the technology is the technology, number one, because the videos of full self-driving are far from comforting. And then following behind it is the legal position as to where liability resides, because you can only be on the road if you are insured.
Hey, Nicholas, when David and I were having that conversation, and he brought this issue up about would the government bail them out, I actually thought he was onto something, and I'll tell you why. I'm not saying that they necessarily would, but I've seen a case where this has actually happened. So in New York City, there is something called, at least it used to be called Command Bus Service. It was a private bus service that people paid a premium from the outer boroughs so they didn't have to take the MTA buses because the buses would not stop every 2 blocks like a typical New York City bus. They only
Yeah,
make
I'm
a handful
familiar
of
with them.
stops.
Yeah.
But you remember them, okay? So they ran into financial trouble, and at some point, the city decided they became an essential public service, and the city bailed and they bailed them out. Now they didn't bail them out. It's not so much that they bailed out like the owners, however you want to look at it. They basically took it over to like a creditor or foreclosure. But they basically said, "We will continue the service. We will have the government. We'll make it part of the MTA." And so they did that, even though you could argue it was a service for more well-heeled people, but they did it. And I think that was less essential probably than Uber and Lyft are to, you know, because a lot of the cabs have been put out of business, a lot of the private car services have been put out of business. I think David could tell you stories from where he lives about what happens when I think there was a week or so that there was no Uber service. Maybe there was a strike or something. I'll let him speak to that. I mean, it creates a major problem, and so I wouldn't take that off the table if that's a possibility. I wouldn't like it. I don't think they should. I think we should just let the market figure out how to readjust. But
If
I'm
they
not.
privatize the company, that would be one thing. But I mean, I
y-
think you need to take private, which is what happened with Command and what happened with a lot of the bus companies. Essentially, they were taken by this. I mean,
Profits
when we say
over
take
everybody.
take
When you say
private,
take it private,
they
eventually
were
the MTA
nationalized.
took
Essentially,
them over. They were
yeah,
private, and then the
that's what I'm
MTA
saying.
took
They
them over.
effectively
Yeah.
nationalized. It's like a take private by the state.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 That's true. Okay. Okay.
Okay, moving on. The next one from the New York Times. They say they have sources that a American defense contractor called L3 Harris is scuttling their plans to buy Israel's NSO group, the makers of Pegasus, despite alleged U.S. intel officials' support. That part's interesting. That's the subtext, but that's the interesting bit. That alleged, although I believe that's totally true. I imagine the U.S. intelligence community would love an American company to buy that, so that they could have it in house. It says, despite alleged U.S. intel officials' support after the Biden administration's outrage over the talks. Does that mean he's outraged that they even met to discuss it? I guess that's what he means. The American contractor is said to have cited support from intelligence officials for its effort to acquire NSO, the Israeli spyware company blacklisted by the Biden administration. Okay, yeah, that sounds like Biden's pissed off that they met with a blacklisted company. 5 people familiar with the negotiations. Well, that's a lot. Said that the L3 Harris team had brought with them a surprising message that made the deal seem possible. American intelligence officials, they said, quietly supported its plans to purchase NSO. That, I completely believe that. That doesn't surprise me at all. Whose technology over the years had been of intense interest to many intelligence and law enforcement agencies around the world, including the FBI and the CIA. The talks continued in secret until last month. Where does Biden come in? Here it is. Days later, L3 Harris, which is heavily reliant on government contracts, yep, they get their money from the Department of Defense. So they're yeah, that's who's buttering their bread, is the U.S. government. That's their big client. So you can't piss off, your biggest client, which in this case is the U.S. So it says, L3 Harris, which is heavily reliant on government contracts, notified the Biden administration that it had scuttled its plans to purchase NSO. Although several people familiar with the talk said there have been attempts to resuscitate the negotiations, left in place are questions in Washington about whether parts of the U.S. government, with or without the knowledge of the White House, has seized an opportunity to try and bring control of NSO's powerful spyware under U.S. authority. Yeah, of course. But Biden, no matter what, has to pretend like he despises this idea. He has to do that. And of course there's government intelligence agencies that would love to see that come in-house, obviously, despite the administration's very public stance against the Israeli firm. Yep, that's just a bunch of potential kabuki theater going on there. So, do we go on to the next one, or anyone have a thought on that?
And just the point is that the idea that both governments are not completely aware and are not, like we said before, using these companies as proxies where they don't have suitable legal jurisdiction is, pure theater.
So the next one is Elon Musk's offer to buy Twitter likely was a joke, according to Bloomberg, since he previously pretended he would take Tesla private, but he may not be able to get out of the deal. Why would you, if it was you can make jokes without losing $1 billion.
$44 billion joke, wow.
That's an expensive joke.
But hold on, but that's the point. It's like, it could be a joke, but it's just a mask because it's sleight of hand, because you get to sell $8.5 billion worth of stock without tanking your stock price. That's
right.
That's the joke. The joke's on the Tesla shareholders who
right.
don't see this as a negative. And what's $1 billion when you manage to liquidate $20 billion? Both the who on Twitter wants to see me liquidate $10 billion of Tesla stock to pay my taxes, right? Oh, Elizabeth Warren's so bad, let me sell. This was all pure theater, which is driven by tax strategy. And the Twitterati are, lapping it up. I mean, it's just, that's the joke. The joke's on the fact that he's a meme king that is effectively playing the narrative in order to maximize his tax position.
Okay, so next up.
I can't wait until the court case when they say hashtag meme king. Elon Musk made this statement in Twitter, and it was seen as a joke. And his character of being a meme king is consistent with this position, Your Honor.
Elongate. No, that is hashtag elongate. The next is from
Look, I mean, let's be clear that he is gaslighting. I mean, what he does is extremely clever version of gaslighting. He always has. That's why, buyout of Tesla at 420 is a joke. The same that they're saying with the price of Twitter at 54.20. It's always got this element of I was just joking. Don't take what I say seriously. It's. I understand why Bloomberg would allude to this.
there's a daughter article from CNBC that Elon notified Twitter he wants to terminate the merger agreement, claiming that Twitter didn't provide the relevant business info he requested. So, next big topic is from South China Morning Post that China's antitrust watchdog punishes Tencent, Alibaba, Didi, and others with $64,000 in fines. That's like what they spend on hand sanitizer in a day. For 28 unreported merger deals as far back as 2011. Okay, so that's an incredibly soft crackdown. Anyways,
It's like rounding error.
yeah, that's a truly absurdly small amount of money for them. Anyway, the next is a report details Apple's 8-year struggle to build a self-driving car, as 20 people who worked on the project cite constantly shifting goals and more. The Apple Car project has suffered repeated setbacks throughout its development, caused in part by a need to constantly prove its worthiness to management. The Apple, and then Cheryl can pin this one if you could. Suffered repeated setbacks. Apple spending a lot of the last 8 years struggling to keep the effort on a positive trajectory. Apple has been working on some form of automotive project for a long time, with it rumored to range from car design to the creation of a self-driving system. In a profile of the project as a whole, it seems that the attempt to impact the automotive industry is on rocky ground. In one key example, Apple used a number of prototype self-driving vehicles to travel 40 miles through Montana in August of 2021. The project, which was filmed via drones, was for the creation of a polished video for upper Apple management, including CEO Tim Cook, to demonstrate it was still progressing nicely. While the video demonstration was a success, including demonstrating that vehicles could drive without needing high-definition three-dimensional road maps over the journey, it was short-lived. The same vehicles traveling in Silicon Valley still suffered from issues, including lane issues and hitting curbs. The article, based on interviews with more than 20 people who worked on the project, goes on to say it was an example of the problems caused by constantly shifting goals and the revolving door of leaders, in turn caused by an uncertainty of the project itself. The employee changes have been numerous, including rumors that it was dissolved. High-profile exits include Director of Machine Learning Ian Goodfellow and automotive engineer J.C. Moore. The example also demonstrated how engineers, quote, waste precious time choreographing demonstrations along known routes, proving that technology works in specific places but practically nowhere else. Quote, if you spend enough money, you can get almost any fixed route to work, explained former Uber self-driving vehicle engineer. Quote, but what isn't shown is whether you can build a self-driving software in a scalable fashion and whether you can operate in a reasonably broad area.
Well, and aren't the robo taxis messing up the traffic in San Francisco? I read that last week. I think it's Cruise that has robo taxis.
Yeah, they do. They do fully robo with no human driver, and they're doing paid taxi service. I've not heard that they're. I did a while ago hear that they all.
I read it.
Yeah, I read that they all piled up near the Panhandle Park, but I haven't heard anything since then, and that was a little while ago. And it seemed like an isolated incident. Like they all
I
kind of.
heard this.
Yeah.
Yeah, about a week ago.
Oh. I imagine
I
it
don't
couldn't.
know you. I don't know about you, but I really wouldn't want to be in a self-driving car for a good 5 or 10 years. I don't think.
A lot of us Tesla owners let it drive us for hours on end every week, so we already are. We're just in very constrained circumstances. I mean, I put autopilot on in every possible circumstance and let it nearly crash, and then recover and hope it teaches them something. But it just entirely depends on roads. So from a UK point of view, if you're on a UK motorway, it's pretty flawless. Regularly go for an hour or two without any intervention. If you're on a UK A road, it's less flawless. Probably goes wrong every half an hour. If you're on a UK country road, something goes wrong within. If you were to just engage it and then refuse to touch it, or just kind of hold the wheel and close your eyes, you would be dead guaranteed within 2 to 5 minutes on a UK country road,
Wow.
because it would just fail to go around a corner, go beep 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 beep, and then just drive straight off the side of the road into like a tree,
There's
Wow.
a
for
YouTube
sure.
video of
Because
that,
I
right?
mean,
There's
I've what's
UK who
that?
shows that. It's pretty interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely will do that because I've there's somewhere there are places where there's enough overrun of like gravel or something on the side of the road to actually let it, because I was slightly well. Firstly, it's obvious that it cannot rescue the situation because the EU have set a steering angle limit, for example. So if you get into a sufficiently steep corner on a country road, it will, just as it gets into the worst part of the corner, abort for you, and then just steer straight. Basically, it won't even slam the brakes on, and within 1 second you'll be into a tree. And there are a couple of places where I put that to the test by just letting it go off the road onto gravel, and it does it. I mean, it's quite shocking. But then on a motorway, it's pretty flawless. So you just
So
have to know where exactly.
this must fulfill your daredevil needs. Just driving this car.
No, it's fine. I mean, people. Well, I hope that most people drive these things according to their personality and their understanding of it. So my wife will only use autopilot on a motorway and some A roads. I will just use it everywhere I can possibly get away with it. But I
But
Will
you're
you do it? Will you take your kids in the car and keep it on?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's much
but you're paying
safer
attention
for
though,
it.
Ben.
It's
Ben,
much safer
you're
for it
paying.
to be on in the motorway.
Sorry, Ben.
I'm
You're
paying a lot of attention. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Well,
Because I
actually,
know some
the
people who
attention.
don't, and they have like intermittent attention. Most of the people that I know who drive a Tesla hold on to it still as if they were driving a normal car, even though it's in its automated mode. So, in terms of where you hold your hands, I'm
Yeah.
curious
Yeah, I
where
put
you
my
hold your
hands
hands.
somewhere else. Yeah, I slightly move my hands when it's on autopilot to remind me that it is in primary control, but I am. So it's the same as flying an aircraft. When you fly an aircraft, you have a very positive transfer of control. You say you have. So if I'm transferring control to somebody else, I say you have control, and they, in a very anal fashion, say I have control, and then you know that they have control. Now you may both have your hands on the controls because you might be following through, not in that respect unless things go wrong, but following the other person through as in feeling their movements. But you're very clear about who's in primary control, and if there's any forceful movements to be made, it's that person. So I've just applied the same methodology in the car. So if I'm driving, I'm in control, no question. When I double click the stalk down and it goes ding ding and autopilot's on, that's like me saying to the car, you have control, and it's saying back to me, I have control. And I'm following through. But then that would be the same as like an instructor in a plane or helicopter saying the same thing to you as a student. And then the moment you screw up, the instructor knows that actually they have primary responsibility to take over. So the car is in control. I am holding the steering wheel differently and lightly, but it's completely 100% my responsibility. If anything goes wrong, if it touches the curb, if it goes
Do
off
you
road,
take
And you
behavior?
trust other people to be as good at doing that as you. So imagine now you've got
no,
100 people who are on the road without your background. Would
no,
you
I
be
don't,
comfortable with
Nicholas.
a
But
hundred other people?
I've not seen enough other Tesla drivers to know, and I'd be interested to hear from those who are here. But certainly looking at my wife, what she does is just avoid the whole situation and only engage it where she's comfortable with the way it's going to behave. I think there's a whole spectrum of people, from somebody who's equally
Just
sensible, and
so
her wife,
imagine there's 100 people. Imagine there's a hundred
but there
people
are
on the
idiots who
road.
get in the
How
passenger seat,
how
yeah,
many
and drive.
people do you think are going to kill people?
um, well, I think the fact that the insurance company gives me 10% off my insurance just because I have autopilot as a feature on my car, and that's calculated by actuaries and quants and other such level of nerds, says something. So I'm getting money off the insurance for having the feature. So
Oh,
Forget the insurance. How many out of 100 people would you trust to be driving a car that is on autopilot using that software? Out of 100,
um,
let's say there are 100 drivers in your area.
well, just picked randomly from the population. and that I've got to kind of sit in the car and feel comfortable. Probably
No, not
20.
sit in the car. Yeah, right. Okay. So 80% of these people are going to crash and kill either themselves or their passengers or other
That sounds about
drivers.
right, though. That
Yeah.
sounds about right, given the amount of accidents.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Um, yes, I mean, I can't argue with that. I would not feel comfortable sitting in the passenger seat with
Makes me
out of a
nervous, just
out
thinking
of a
that there are
hundred.
people
Yeah,
on the road like that who are going to be not paying attention, playing with their phone, vaping, whatever the hell they're going to be doing, not concentrating like you are. If you're saying
yeah.
eight out of ten, eight
It's
out
a
of ten
training.
people are likely to be like that, it's going to be a hellscape being on the road.
It could be. It could be. It's a training issue, I think. If you're when you're flying, there was enough people killed because of human-computer interaction issues in aircraft. Think Boeing 737 Max with their MCAS system. Think of the Air France system where it went into the wrong flight mode and plunged into the sea. And that's professional people who are trained, or in the case of 737 Max, not trained, which is the problem. But in general, it's a very professional circumstance, and people should know their system and know how to interact with it. You grab a Tesla, you're told nothing by anybody. There's not really even a manual that tells you anything about it. So you're left entirely to your intuition. If they get it right, it'll be like an iPhone and you don't need a manual and it all just works out. If they get it wrong, people will die. I think the truth
Yeah,
will be
but it's
somewhere in the middle.
fatal. Yeah, it's a fatal outcome. So basically, what you're saying is that 8 out of 10 people are, likely not to be good stewards of these cars. And the good thing about driving normally is that you have a jeopardy for yourself as well as for others. But as soon as you hand over control, you have control to the Tesla, and it crashes 10 times out of 10 because there will be these edge cases. This is a disaster, and people won't have that symmetry of
It may be
oh,
that
I'm
maybe G,
driving carefully because I don't want to die myself. They'll
Yeah,
just be like, oh,
because
I'm doing something else.
sorry, Ben and Nicholas, beta testing is still we are testing the software. You're not supposed to give up complete control to the software. You're supposed to be vigilant, watch, observe, and take actions immediately. It's not like the software take your capacity of instant braking away from you. It's like having a car with a system that you are learning at the same time, training the car or the system for yourself, and with the cooperation, the system become
Understood, but
optimized.
eight
yeah,
out of
Aaron,
10 people are not trustworthy.
but
At
to be
least in
clear,
Ben's area.
hold on, to be clear,
Okay, then
I'm not.
those people can't be even trusted with cars then, because people drive inebriated, people drive with headphones in the cell phone,
Right, but they
so
have, but they have
they.
a, but they have risk. They have a mirror risk, and so unless they're completely wanting to die, and they're yes, people are reckless, but there is a mortal risk to the driver. When you outsource the driving and you're supposed to be paying attention and you have even less attention, you are inviting a problem.
So hold on. Let me make two things very clear that are quite important. Firstly, in the UK, we are not beta testing anything. There is no full self-driving beta. I'm talking about the standard stuff that doesn't label it most of itself as beta. Some of it says beta, depends on which particular sub feature. But a lot of people will just use it and don't really feel like they're beta testing. And it will kill
Oh,
you
so
on a
you
country
you're
road.
not talking about beta test, because
No, no,
beta
no.
testing so far is
We
so
don't have
safe. I
listed
mean,
beta.
it stops the car even when I can take maybe few more minutes to reaction. The car itself senses really well ahead of time, anticipating and informing me what's happening outside of my field of vision. So to me, beta testing this autopilot, it's safer than the regular human beings driving.
So
Aaron,
to be
this
clear,
is
in
what's
North,
known in markets as fooled by randomness, or the black swan effect, is that you're all good until you're not.
yeah,
And
that
that's the
absolutely
problem.
could happen. You can feel that driving it. So in the UK and many other territories, there is no full self-driving beta. That's very much to the UK, to the northern US rather. I'm talking about the standard navigate on autopilot type level automation. Um, which as I said, I would close my eyes for 10, 15 minutes on a motorway without feeling too nervous, and I would be guaranteed to be dead within 1 minute on a country road. And you're equally allowed to engage it in both circumstances. You have to know the difference. The other point, Nicholas, to say though, is when I said I would only trust 20 out of 100 drivers to operate a Tesla safely on autopilot with me in the passenger seat, I'm not. That's not factoring in the fact that I don't think that the one. I believe that the ones who are less competent with it are less likely to engage it. So if they did engage it and they were a random
I'm not saying
person,
even with you as a passenger. I'm just saying if that
just
is
being on the
if
road
that
with them,
not,
yeah,
that just just being on the road with other people, like you just said, I would feel comfortable sleeping for 15, 20 minutes on the motorway. That is what everybody should be terrified of. There will be people who will make bad decisions and outsource to the car because they're tired or because they think that the car's going to drive better than them or whatever it is. I mean, that's the frightening thing. And who's then going to be responsible? The
So
driver, the
1950s, the
software, the
original
car
pitch.
manufacturer, the
the
insurer?
driver.
Who's
The driver in this case, if I close my eyes, which I don't, by the way, if I ever was to close my eyes in the car, I would ask somebody else to tell them they're responsible for lookout because the car can't even see, for instance, debris in the road. Even the full self-driving Teslas on, your Tesla Aram as it is, if there's a tire in the road or something on a highway and it falls off a lorry, it's not going to avoid it. It's just going to plow into it.
In the 1950s,
Yeah,
when
And
but
General
you know,
Motors was petitioning the federal
just
government
one quick
for
share,
federal
Chris.
subsidies. Hold on,
Just
just
one
real quick.
quick share.
I just have a quick point. The
Just
quick point, I'll
quickly,
leave it.
the second my hands drop off of the steering wheel, I get alarm, get the sound, and
Yes,
I have to open my eyes and touch the steering wheel to drive again. So, which saves life.
right. We've all read Tesla's marketing literature. Hold on, just one real quick. 1950s, General Motors. They have a whole thing where the original pitch to the federal government of why they should receive massive quantities of federal subsidies for spending their stuff in the United States, and we export this to a lot of these things worldwide. But in the original pitch documents, you can actually read them. You can see the original propaganda videos around it. The federal government was originally going to have the highways actually being automated. You would have a traffic controller similar to what you have essentially at the airport, calling like traffic control. It's like you're cleared for entry thing. And once you got onto the federal highway, the car would drive itself. That was a part of the original pitch. They dropped that from there because they couldn't quite figure out how to essentially, if they would fit, how they would impact essentially the truckers and such. But the original pitch was actually full automation from the beginning. That got dropped off several times. Same thing in the 1980s. They said we could actually say instead of full automation for the entire road, what if we just do a lane or two essentially on the inner part? And they solved it. They built it. It worked, and they went, okay, cool. We've got full automation for the highways. Then they just said, not sure if it's going to impact the truckers. So they just left the technology just kind of just sitting there. When DARPA started to spend a fortune saying we'd love to essentially have this on the battlefield, then they started saying, what if we do essentially autonomous driving off the highways? And that's a big deal about whether or not you're on the highway or off the highway. But this thing about whether or not you can trust the car on the highway about being driving, we've had it near solved for almost 70 years now. We're literally making work for ourselves. You bury a
Chris,
copper
I don't
cable,
think that
there's no
includes
work
debris
to
and
this. No, hold on,
I
hold on,
don't
hold
think
on,
that
hold on. This is
includes
the point.
debris and
You
potholes, though.
drop
It
a
certainly
copper
doesn't today.
line in a buried road. You do this in factories. We've been doing that one since the 30s. You just follow the electrical cable. There is almost no technology involved in this. We
Chris,
have
it
insisted
doesn't
on
account
building the
for
roads without this technology in order to protect other political or economic interests for labor unions, etc. And I understand the reasoning for
well,
that. But
you're
arguing this is
talking
a
about a
Chris.
technology thing, it's
railway.
a joke.
Chris, do you drive?
What do you mean? Of course.
You don't. Okay, just wondering because it's just even the most up to date self driving cars don't account for sudden debris in the road or a pothole or anything like
I
that.
don't
So
give a
big
shit
pothole in
about our current self-driving cars things. That they were built essentially without the sensors built into the road themselves. The idea of selling the technology on a consumer level thing when you have regulation that creates for the roads that they're driving
But
on,
Chris,
that's the
that's
actual
the
technology.
point. The point is, yeah, but the point is that involves massive costs of
No,
embedding
it
in every
doesn't.
single.
Run
If you
the numbers
imagine
for
going
cost of
every
cable
single
essentially
road
of
in
half
the
an inch
whole
wide,
country
essentially going down 30 kilometers. It is not expensive. It has never been expensive. That
on
has
every
never been the
road,
issue. We are being distracted by a lot of side issues by groups that are very well financed that honestly do not have any interest of actually building out this technology. This is a
Chris,
side
how does
distraction.
a copper wire running down the road help you avoid a pothole or a piece of debris that's just fallen off a lorry?
That's not okay. Look, when you have essentially, and the way you do is you adjust the speed. So there's two different types of cars on the road. You've got passenger, you've got cargo. Cargo is the one that actually causes all the accidents, has a large amount of damage. And the difference between a cargo and a passenger, cargo doesn't need to go fast. In fact, it can go very, very slow and be very economical. There's very little reason for those to go very fast. The ones that essentially are going faster, passenger vehicles, those can be downsized for actually making part of that. When you talk about debris and other things, the only thing that makes it dangerous is speed plus mass. If you have the cargo vehicles going slow, you don't need to have that speed for the other
We don't
parts.
have enough spare lanes for that yet, buddy,
Oh
here in the
please!
UK. There's enough
This
traffic as it
increases
is
capacity by 10x to
without
30x,
No,
depending on your
I want to
application.
drive
without
wherever I want, Chris. I don't want to drive according to some
Yeah,
robot.
governments
I want
won't
to drive
spend
on the
that money.
left lane. I want to drive on the left lane. This is America. Come on, Chris.
I mean, this is the cargo stuff.
There's a
It
reason.
means that
There's a
when you
reason
take
why
capacity and
Warren
you
Buffett
increase
owns
capacity, it means you've
the
got free lanes
railways.
for doing whatever you want with.
There's a
This
reason
has
why
nothing to do
Warren
with tech.
Buffett
This is
has a
pure
railway
politics.
investment.
I agree with in theory. In practice, it's going to be hard to
Well, you
convince
can no
people.
longer integrate this. There's so many different defragmented, essentially standard state to state departments, technology lobbies, etc. You can't integrate this unless you
Okay,
nationalize the whole
so
thing.
it's not possible.
Yeah.
So let me move on. Let's move on.
Okay, so the next one is from CNN, and the headline is How North Korean Spies Infiltrate U.S. Crypto Firms Posing as Remote Workers. United Nations says the country of North Korea has stolen billions of dollars worth of crypto from exchanges. And then it starts by telling the story, and if Cheryl, if you could please pin this one, this is quite interesting. And it, by the way, proves a revelation I shared about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, as you'll see in a second. It says, Devin, the founder of a cryptocurrency startup based in San Francisco, woke up one day in February to the most bizarre phone call of his life. The man on the other end, an FBI agent, told him that the seemingly legitimate software developer he hired the previous summer was a North Korean operative who has sent tens of thousands of dollars of his salary to the North Korea. Stunned, Devin hung up and immediately cut off the employee from company accounts. Quote, he was a good contributor, Devin says, puzzled by the man who had claimed to be Chinese and passed multiple rounds of interviews to get hired. Devin's encounter is one example of what U.S. officials say is a relentless, evolving effort by the North Korean government to infiltrate and steal from cryptocurrency and other tech firms. That should be the big... I don't know why they decided to make this about cryptocurrencies, but other tech firms around the world to help fund Kim Jong-un's illicit nuclear and ballistic weapons program. Okay, well, you're just sensationalizing. They're just sending money. Who gives a fuck what they're using it on? Of course they're going to use it on that shit too. But just, it's not like in the wire transfer, they're saying earmark this for nuclear bombs or something. So, North Korean government-backed hackers have stolen the equivalent of billions of dollars in recent years by raiding cryptocurrency exchanges, according to the United Nations. In some cases, they've even been able to nab hundreds of millions of dollars in a single heist, the FBI and private investigators say. Now, U.S. federal investigators are publicly warning about a
The
key
reason, let's be clear, the reason why the UN has to come out with this is because they need to associate this with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. And they can't accuse, of course, the main source of this. They have to go
right,
for a proxy source.
right, right. Now watch, what Nicholas just said ties in nicely with what I said a week and a half ago and what I'm about to read right now.
Know your customer.
U.S. federal investigators are publicly warning about a key pillar of the North Korean strategy in which the regime places operatives in tech jobs throughout the information technology industry. Now, hold on. The
If they
FBI,
have a Korean name.
the Treasury and State Departments issued a rare public advisory about thousands of high-skilled IT personnel who provide Pyongyang with critical stream of revenue that helps bankroll the regime's highest economic and security priorities. And did not a bald, handsome elderly tech bro come in here and tell us that, in fact, China is using North Korea as a sort of proxy, as even Nicholas just kind of alluded to, and that one of the big strategies is getting their smart tech geeks hired to infiltrate to cause as much damage as possible. Yes. Well, by the way, the Chinese ones will get hired, and will do corporate espionage and hopefully not get caught. The North Korean ones take it a step further because they can and try and rip out all the data and burn the house down to the fucking ground. The Chinese ones can't do that because then it's just
But
a
how did they detect this? They detected this through the money chain, right? That's what they're telling them. Did
yeah,
you know he's sending money? So the surveillance, as we know, comes through finance. It
banking
comes
system.
through all these connections, and that's obviously the most the dangerous place for the UN and the most dangerous place for the world order as it stands is through the monetary field. And so you have to create these narratives so that the general population can say, we don't want to use this because of terrorist financing and child pornography and all of those terrible things that we want to cut out. And so you have to give up your agency in order to allow for them to surveil everyone to find these particular people. But it's going to be extremely difficult to find these people because none of the credentialing is standardized and there is no information, identity information that enables you to know who, when you're hiring someone who's remote, where they come from, what they, you have no way of knowing.
Well, Japanese local government once employed North Korean engineer by accident, because he wasn't subcontracted. So it can happen everywhere.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's part of a narrative that says, we should all be suspicious of each other because, you don't know. So what is the appeal to authority is, what are we going to do? Help us. Oh, we'll help you out and we'll surveil everything and make sure that, the bad ones are weeded out. That's what they want people to do, to outsource their agency and their consciousness.
Okay.
I'm actually surprised that we're only hearing about this now. I mean, we've known about this since back in the day when outsourcing started to happen. And it still continues to happen now, even with people in person interviews, where you'll get a resume of a contractor who has tons of companies listed that he never worked for, but names are part of a team. You follow up the background, and he worked what he
You've
did
definitely
here.
gone down the rabbit hole there.
Whoa, enough of the monastic bells. That's really cool. It sounds like you've been absorbed by a monastery or something.
Good comment.
All of a sudden, there was an echo and everything, like a hall.
Ka-ching. So cool.
And North Korea is watching you.
Phil, you have to check your audio and circle back again.
Yeah, at first, Phil, it gave a kind of godlike presence to your voice, but then after that, we just couldn't hear shit.
Is that better?
In
Yes,
any
yes, it
case,
is.
LinkedIn is getting more popular among the work from home people, so that quite easily some companies by mistake hire those people.
Yeah, this is why some industries don't do remote work. Why for some companies you have to come in. At least that way it's a little bit harder. So, but it's
Yeah.
unfortunate to see that because I think the move towards remote work was beneficial for everyone, for families, for kids. You could spend more time with your kids, spend more quality time with your family. But this kind of stuff kind of puts a fork in that and says, "Hey, hold on, we got to be a little bit more careful." So it's unfortunate, but inevitable.
It's a
How
natural
can you
progression. I
spend?
mean, we heard during COVID of people taking more than one remote job, working you guys have probably read the news about programmers who are working two or three full-time jobs because they were working remotely and their employers were happy with them.
And they're pushing the same code to all three.
More than likely, or, well, as programmers, we copy and paste from one to another, right? So they probably copied it from one client, moved to the other.
It's perfect.
Well, GitHub helps you do this automatically now, as we've mentioned in previous rooms, so you can copy other people's code without even trying.
I'm telling you, I was on GPT-3 the other day, and I was, it
Is
says
that a drug?
GPT-3 is the AI.
Yeah, I know. It's the linguistic model with 100 billion
But it is
parameters.
like a drug because if you ever, for anyone in the room who's ever done, launched a business or a community or anything else, you have this function. You can, create a tagline. So you can just write in something that you would think was a creative job, like what's the tagline for creating an internet of truth? And the taglines it comes up with are amazing. I literally was like, wow, how does it do this? And it's like having a team of creators, and it's just about the questions you want to ask it. So if anyone has the opportunity to join the beta, I would recommend it. Like DALI, GPT-3 is incredible.
Okay, next up is TechCrunch says they have sources that Tiger Global plans to slow down their startup investments for the next 2 quarters, but is on track to raise a new fund at the end of the year. Reuters says an investigation finds that Binance continued to operate in Iran as recently as September last year, despite U.S. sanctions for Iran and a company ban on business there.
Yeah,
And
they're on the list. They how does Binance get away with that? Because it's not domiciled in America.
yeah, Reuters reporting they have sources that I told before we got into the tech headlines today. Myanmar's junta, that's the military that's now sort of in charge at the moment, rolls out Chinese surveillance cameras with facial recognition technology in 5 more cities and plans to add them to every state in Myanmar. Installing the Chinese-built cameras with facial recognition capabilities in more cities across the country. Now, which facial recognition system do you imagine they're using if they're using Chinese-made cameras? And where do you imagine? How do you imagine that deal went down? I can assure you they're using China's SenseTime facial recognition system. And the journalist behind the story, I'm opening the story now from Reuters, and I'm doing a quick search in the article for the word SenseTime, and nothing comes up. Let's do a search for facial, and it doesn't mention which system, which is a real shame because that is a big clue as to who actually instigated this coup. A big clue to the coup. It's a coup clue. Uh, why not figure that out? I mean, it's quite sad that China hasn't been received the appropriate recognition it deserves for causing the fall of that democratic government, and they really should. That really should be publicly understood,
You
and somebody should.
you can see on the picture below the picture there is a recognition of a company that produced that camera. It's a
Uh-huh.
Chinese company.
Alhua.
Well, the Chinese cameras are actually quite impressive. China specifically went out of their way to be able to develop a camera to target the African market. So they developed really good low light technology to take better picture of people with colored skin. So there's no surprise that they would be pushing those cameras for all sorts of applications because getting low light photography done well is quite tricky, and the computational photography techniques that we've seen emerge in the last few years have been quite impressive.
Mm,
The mask is going to become everybody's best friend.
Dalhua cameras. I would love, love to see a real deep dive, proper documentary into the origins of the coup. And
Do you think you're going to be able to wear a mask and sunglasses when you walk around major cities in the future?
Well, I think some of the cameras can see through the masks, right? So it's like that one.
It says here the tenders have been won by local procurement firms including Fiscal Security and Communication, Naoyong Technologies, the 3 sources said, and the firm sourced the cameras and some related technology from Chinese surveillance giants Zhejiang Dahua Technology, Huawei Technologies, and
oh,
Hikvision Industries.
ah, oh, all Chinese. What a coincidence!
Yep.
What a coincidence! What a coincidence!
I
That
wonder
China.
if there'll be any I wonder if there'll be any backdoors in that software.
I wonder if China gave it to them for free. as they
The
did
fact
in.
that people that
By the
can't
way,
see what's going,
At
going
least
on
buy now,
is
pay
just so
later.
ridiculous.
yeah, but by the
Just
way,
amazing, yeah. Exactly. Take not even now. Give now. Pay
Yeah,
later.
yeah, buy now, pay later.
Buy now,
Take now.
we pay. You buy now, we take your port later. Thanks.
build now, give back later. Um, huh. It says
When do
since
you think, when do you think people are going to look, we started the call with the news of what's happening in China with Henan Bank and that other, footage coming from Shengshu, none of which we know is 100% true or false, or, we're all in the dark, right? So, and you have total surveillance there. I mean, how long before people really realize um, the issues? And I don't know if you saw over the weekend that the Swiss actually threw out the identity system that was being advocated because they realized that there were going to be companies that control it. So the, it seems like the Swiss have cottoned on to the danger of giving up identity data to private companies controlled by nation states, or just companies. But when do you think regular people are going to realize that they have limited freedoms?
But in Myanmar, you don't have the freedom of this at all. Just like in China, you just adjusted your own action to prevent something.
I agree. I agree. I think it's
Yeah.
corporate surveillance at this point. So it's just different models. I'm saying when does the general person realize that what they're giving up is valuable, and and whether there's going to be any way to resist that, because in China there is no way to resist this. The state has
Another plus,
a
another,
monopoly on violence, and it
yeah,
has the ability to tax you, and it has the ability to restrict your ability to engage with the world. So you can be deplatformed from your country if they decide that you are whatever it is that you've done wrong. So when do people realize? Is it only going to be when it's too late, do you think?
another question I'd like to ask you, Nicholas, is about the compromise between the security and the privacy. Actually, in Taiwan, we also have so many public cameras and surveillance uh, around the public space, and that really help to sometimes to spot some suspect, and police can solve the case maybe in within days because they have all this footage. So it's a compromise between just like security or and your privacy. So what's the line you draw between those two?
Hmm. I mean, that is always the big trade-off. Security and privacy is one of the things that everyone, and simplicity is the other big, or convenience is the other big issue that you need to, the people who care about security think about. I think ultimately it's um, about democracy, because if you have privacy and security that is owned of, by, and for the people, and that the people who we're electing are subjected to those same standards. It's the infrastructure that we surround ourselves with that enables, technology to work. So, my view is the limitation is democracy. If we have the ability to use technologies that enable us to maintain our privacy and our security at the same time, I think that we could have a much better world. But the people who run democracies or even authoritarian regimes have many strong incentives to want to cling to power and corrupt the democratic process. Even when you have a separation of powers in the US, we see it through the invisible hand, again, of Adam Smith refers to, which is financial interests controlling political interests. And so, in a world of information, and in a world of perfect information or near perfect information, the question is, you know, can we evolve our democracies to meet our technologies? And I think that we can, but it depends on how free you are to evolve your democracy. And at the moment, there are not many places in the world where we're free to evolve our democracies to use technology.
okay, next up, Um, mm,
Is Tyler there?
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Tyler, you're
Yep.
muted.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. Um, shows the world dividing into. So here's an interesting article because just doing a little diving on China and Myanmar, and it says from Council on Foreign Relations.org, and I'm pinning it to the top of the room. It should come up shortly. China's support for Myanmar further shows the world dividing into autocracy versus democracy. China doubles down in Myanmar with world distracted by Ukraine. And in the first paragraph says, when the Myanmar junta first launched the coup in February last year, there was some discussion in the following months of the possibility that China, which had enjoyed a close relationship with the previous National League of Democracy government, might not fully endorse the coup regime. Of course, Beijing would rhetorically back the coup leaders. Da da da. Anyway, you can read that one if you want a little background on that whole drama. So the next big tech article is what? From MIT Tech Review, the war in Ukraine has prompted militaries to invest more money in AI. NATO has announced a €1 billion fund to invest in startups developing priority tech such as AI. Now NATO's spending $1 billion on AI. Next is from the Wall Street Journal. As mobile ad targeting becomes less effective, because Apple's making it less effective for everyone but themselves, um, companies in the West are pushing the super app idea to capture ever more users' time, attention, and money. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. The super app thing was happening anyways, where the Asia, China has WeChat, which is a super app, started out as a chat app like WhatsApp, and then added finance so that you could send payments, and that took off. And then once there became a ubiquitous standard way for everyone to transfer money instantly, simply, then you could bolt on all kinds of products and services, and then boom, you have a super app, which is kind of like a mini, like dozens and dozens of dating apps, Ubers, everything, Airbnb, all inside of the chat app that has the finance app. Now, Elon Musk has said recently in an interview explaining his motives behind Twitter. So if I do a search for Musk, Twitter, WeChat, which is the super app in China, here it is on June 18th, less than a month ago, 3 weeks ago. Here it is. I'll pin it. Elon Musk said he wants Twitter to become the WeChat of the Western world in his first meeting with employees. Oh, so he's not saying that publicly on his Twitter account or in interviews, but he's letting the fine folks at Twitter know his real big ambition and why he thought the company was so valuable, because it's already close to handling it's got the social bit down to a degree, and if it nails the transactional part, then that's massive. That's the part that you need, and they were certainly working on that. We had heard seen
And
rumors.
that's the part that the government doesn't want Facebook to achieve, which is why they can Novi, they can DM, they can their currency, and they can their blockchain team, because the coherence of your financial field, your healthcare field, and your social field is all of the most valuable data that WeChat and the government collects. So they cannot allow for this to happen,
Right,
especially with its own native currency.
right,
So, I sent you in the back channel, I'd written about this in 2016-17 on, you can look at the deck. I think I sent the deck before,
right,
on the value.earth site. But, this is the only model. But again, the public can have their own version, and it can be a publicly hosted, decentralized, distributed version of WeChat. And what are the two key features of WeChat is identity.
Did we lose Nicholas?
we
Yeah.
lost this.
Nicholas?
By the way,
Sorry,
Tyler,
sorry,
just
sorry.
to
Yeah, identity plus a wallet. That's what you need. Again, I posted a picture in the back chat in the Twitter back channel. But that is the future. But we can do all of these things. The technology is not, does not need to be owned by these networks. We can create interrelated networks, networks of networks that interoperate, that enable us to own the WeChat of the future rather than it be owned by surveillance technocracies.
Tyler, just to mention, I think Elon Musk disclosed his intention to convert Twitter to a WeChat super app during the All In podcast in mid May with your buddy Jason Calacanis. The
Mhm.
interview.
So he says in this article, somebody quoted him from his meeting with the employees, think of it like WeChat in China, which is great now, but there's no WeChat equivalent outside of China, which is very true. Musk said in response to a question about why he wants to buy the social media app. So somebody at Twitter said, why do you want to buy Twitter? And he said, think of it like WeChat in China, which is great now, but there's no WeChat equivalent outside of China. There's a real opportunity to create that. You basically live on WeChat in China because it's so helpful, so useful to daily life. I think if we achieve that or come even closer to that with Twitter, that would be a success. And what he's referring to is all of the payments. Keep in mind, he started PayPal of all things, which is critically
For him, it's a total no-brainer. I mean, again, the head fake of all head fakes could be if they force him to buy it and they push it through, and he gets to acquire it, even if he acquires it at 20 billion more than it's worth. He has the network of AI. He's got the second largest AI team outside of the U.S. government. He's got a network of supercomputers that are driving all around. He's got an ability to plug into the grid and load balance using the cars. He's got Starlink above that can have a top, an over-the-top network, and he's got the ability to have a mesh network on the ground. Uh, this would be a great acquisition for him if he wanted to become a super villain with a super app. It really is. I would fear him owning this asset, so I'd rather he takes his, gets hit with $1 billion fine and, is precluded from owning it, because he could do amazing things, dangerously amazing things with this asset.
there's.
I think he could do better elsewhere.
By the
He
way,
can get snapped cheaper.
right, but notice that in the West, the apps that are in the best prime position to become the WeChat of the West, because WeChat can't become the WeChat of the West because the West won't allow that because it's a Chinese app with all the banking and financing and all identity and all that nonsense. So, who can be the WhatsApp of the West? Obviously, Facebook jumps to mind right away, and Facebook did try to do this. That
Yeah.
and it
As
failed.
soon as you touch finance, and as soon as you threaten to create a currency for the billion users. So the thing about Twitter is it's small enough in terms of users that it's not regarded as too threatening. But if you take a big one like Facebook, it's extremely threatening
Right,
to
but
the state.
Facebook interestingly has an incredible trust issue. No one's going to allow Facebook to become the super app. So, and the
So
irony,
Apple is
I know,
really
I'm getting to that,
is really
but
the plan.
I know, but let me finish the point here that Facebook acquired WhatsApp, owns WhatsApp outright, and Instagram. Those other properties are also the ones that should have a chance to make a go at this, but because they're owned by Facebook, they're just dead on arrival for that same reason of the inherent trust issues with Facebook and whatnot. So then it turns to Apple. But this creates an insane opportunity because the company that should be in the perfect position to do the WhatsApp of the West can't. So then it goes to Apple, which is now, right now, with the next version of the iOS app that's coming out right now, that all the developers are playing with in the beta version right now, has person-to-person payments through credit cards as they finally got person-to-person digital payments working in a
Yeah,
very
Apple Pay works beautifully, and what's more is that Apple Pay massively undercuts the other players in the space, including Stripe and Adyen. So they charge anywhere between their gross revenues are about 1.9%, and they're doing 600 billion and 450 billion respectively. And Stripe caters, with the API mainly to a smaller SME market, and Adyen to the sophisticated market. But Apple is charging 0.15%, and so it really is going after that business. And furthermore, it did so far about $400 billion of business processing. And interestingly enough, for it to be meaningful to them, they would have to do trillions of dollars. So their set status is they are trying to win that marketplace for sure, just looking at their
right,
pricing.
right. But
But
make
I think
no
they can also subsidize their system in the same way that Amazon subsidized all, like the store with Amazon Web Services. Apple can afford to undercut their competitors in a similar fashion.
They are 1/10 of the pricing of the enterprise grade or the enterprise marketplace. So this is a multi-trillion-dollar business opportunity. But for Apple, it's really about the data is even more valuable to them because they preclude others holding that consumption data, and that consumption data, of course, is where the ultimate relationship exists between corporations and the users.
Why couldn't you use like Google Pay on Android? I mean, I don't. I have an Android phone which I barely use. I know it has that was a Samsung, and they have Samsung Pay, which is Samsung's thing. But I mean, there is Google Pay that I use on the web sometimes. I mean, they right. I mean that could be another alternative, right, for the
But these
Android.
are all using traditional rails. So one has to understand that these systems are all running on the existing infrastructure. They are not running on any new form of infrastructure. They are running over Swift, essentially.
anyway. But it does leave Twitter in an unusually good position that they normally wouldn't find themselves in to build the WeChat of the West is the point. But Apple, by the way, is obviously
They
uh,
won't be allowed either. They won't be allowed either. I mean, look, ultimately, they're trying to, Jack was trying to build this into Twitter, and he was, given the door, or he resigned, or whatever happened. But he has the block, or what was Square, in order to evolve this. He has a payments business and he had a social media business. So running side by side, he was CEO of both companies. And if he couldn't unite them, that's telling you something, because he's not, for all of his foibles and issues, he's not stupid in respect of understanding the importance of both Square and Block, whatever you want to call it, and Twitter. So there was a reason why he was prevented from unifying those ideas.
okay. So the next one and the last one of the big boring articles is from Politico. It says Europe's state of mass surveillance. The EU's top court says mass surveillance is banned. Governments do it anyways. According to Politico, which is based out of the EU, Jack Murphy was suspicious. His ex-girlfriend Eve Doherty seemed to know a lot about who he was calling. His suspicions were merited. Doherty had been using her job in the Irish police force to access his phone records. An investigation by the local judiciary revealed Doherty was disciplined and transferred in 2011. 3 years later, in 2014, the European Court of Justice ruled that the Irish law that forced telcos and internet service providers to hang on to traffic and location data was contrary to EU rule, yada, yada, yada. You get the idea. And the whole article is, as the headline says, Europe's state of mass surveillance. Governments are doing mass surveillance even though it's not legal. And this article goes into how that's happening. By the way, there were a lot of photos over the weekend and at the end of last week from London of small temporary portable billboards that were placed outside of key metro stations saying you are now entering facial recognition, government facial recognition area. And that's concerning because London has a whole lot of cameras. And I imagine they have to be measuring the response from people to these signs about facial recognition. Because if,
You
unless,
have to have informed consent at some point, and the issue is going to be, like I said before, when will they stop you wearing a mask and sunglasses?
so, well, that's a perfect opportunity for me to pitch my new facial recognition defeating face cream called.
There is a set of interference patterns you can put onto the frame of a pair of glasses, and it can confuse these systems by just modifying a few pixels, and all of a sudden you look like Charlize Theron, according to the computer. So there was an article about that a few years ago by
Well,
MIT
you
researchers.
look
I'll
a little
post it
more
in the chat.
like a Picasso
I,
painting
I,
with
I
the
thought you were going to bring out a burqa business there for a second.
I
camera.
would be, I'd be
Oh,
concerned how quickly that can be defeated in software, though. Once they know that exists, I reckon that's a quick tweak.
but I wonder, you beg an interesting question about why France is so quick to ban burqas. um, yeah, you're going to have a whole lot of burqa bans as you're already starting to have in the EU. Hmm,
You better
interesting.
believe it. Burqa bans are us.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if those really work. I don't know if you guys remember when they started doing the cameras throughout the U.S. There was all these scams of them selling. Supposedly, you could spray this spray on your license plate, and it obfuscates the number if it's being taken by a camera. And they were all bunk, and that never worked.
Well, I posted the article in the room chat for now for anyone who's curious.
Okay, so now we get into the tweets. The first tweet I have today is from Jeff G, and it's from Deutsche Welle, one of my favorite UK publication or EU publication, and it says Russia shuts down Nord Stream pipeline for quote unquote repairs. The move will temporarily reduce Europe's gas supply. Yeah, and it has the Germans shitting themselves. And some officials fear Russia could prolong the shutdown to destabilize Europe. Gee, you think? You think that might Russia has
They
reduced?
wouldn't. They wouldn't do an arsehole thing like that, would they?
No, because I mean Putin is many things, but he's certainly just a lovely guy that would be very. And if he was going to do anything that was going to really disrupt anybody, of course he would call first and be like, "Hey, I'm just letting you. Is this cool with you guys that we do this right now? Because I don't want to disrupt you guys. You're my bros. You're my homies."
I wonder if he's ever entered after the phrase sorry to inconvenience you." I think that would be zero chance.
Uh,
Tyler,
yes,
did you cover it might have been a while back, but did anyone even mention or come across mentioning that the Dutch have actually reactivated a coal plant that they have
no,
here,
no.
and also that they've approved drilling for oil in Groningen, right off the North Sea.
I got news for you.
So, yeah.
They're going to have to look under every seat cushion.
Oh no, they actually it's funny, Tyler, because they've managed to I'd probably say the Dutch are really efficient. I think
Yeah,
they've managed to come up with the difference of it
yeah.
because I know that they were down. I think they were down like by 50%, but I think by reopening certain things and asking approval of just basically of the people and going to have these decisions made, that they decided that it was in the best interest of the Dutch as well to sort of do this for the country, right? So it's very interesting to see. But also, they seem to be going through a resurgence of the golden age because they do have the ports in Rotterdam, and everything that's kind of coming into Europe by ship is coming through Rotterdam. So I feel like they're going through a second version of their golden age because they seem to be doing fairly well, and we're not seeing a huge impact on energy here. So that's what I'm saying. It's very interesting because Germany is on the border of Netherlands, but Netherlands is, outside of Schiphol and the drama that's going on in Schiphol, that's a whole nother animal because that's a bigger fish to fry with what's ruining all the summer holidays for most of Europe is the mess in Schiphol. So I think that, has anyone even talked about that psychotic mess going on right now?
It's happening in
And
Stockholm and other
no,
European
it,
capitals.
no, in Schiphol, it's madness. It's like just trying to get around by airplane has been an issue.
Yeah. So the pipeline is off. As expected, Nord Stream 1 is at zero this morning, Germany's head energy regulator told Reuters. What happens at the end of the maintenance, nobody's able to say at this moment. We won't know anytime soon. So they're worried that they're going to leave it off. And basically, the countries that are dependent on Nord Stream and Russian energy generally are in a bit of a difficult situation to keep the lights on. And they're going to have to do things they never thought they would ever want to have to do again. Like, was just saying, like start drilling for oil again right off their coasts, and things, uh, any source of energy they can possibly get their hands on, they're going to get their hands on and start squeezing, because it's either that or having incredibly cold winters coming up, or so there's quite a bit of panic on this issue.
Yeah, the pipeline here in Canada is there's a lot of discussion about ramping that back up. So sorry, Greta, the environment I guess is going to have to take a back seat because energy prices are spiking. So I think this is the unfortunate trade given the geopolitics of the situation.
Oh, so here, Mueller, the head of energy for Germany, says if we no longer receive Russian gas, current supplies will last for 1 or 2 months. So there you go. By the way, of course, you're thinking to yourself, well, might this cause a huge demand for solar panels? Yes, it would. Absolutely, it has. And there's just at a time when there's supply chain issues for the cheap little parts that go into those things. I had somebody in Germany today tell me that it's an absolutely impossibility for anyone who wants to get solar panels at this point. It's too late. So you're,
Tyler, I'm
Most
sure
yeah.
of
that
the solar
Tyler, I'm
panels
sure the Dutch
are
have
from
some in
China
stock.
anyway, right?
I'm sure the
One,
Dutch have some solar panels in stock for sure.
I'm sure China is more than willing to supply those panels.
But those panels would fall apart within like a year or two, wouldn't they?
no,
Absolutely not.
the panels are really simple. The problem is the supply chains and shipping and all of that. So and the demand at this point is going through the roof. When energy costs are this high, these building your own home solar system pays itself back very, very quickly with these new, much higher energy costs.
Those
So,
panels alone are useless. You need either micro inverters or
yeah,
larger centralized inverters, and they're more complicated. They have integrated circuits in them
yeah,
and lots of parts. Panels are very simple, solid state items that once built are built pretty solid. They last a long
yeah,
time.
the,
Inverters and micro inverters, much more complex supply
yeah.
chain, and you either need one for every panel or you need one for a series of panels. But you definitely need them, otherwise they're just producing useless DC.
But
But
Tyler,
we
Tyler,
yeah,
there's another so-called situation now, as in the European are scooping out all the LNG, choking off the power supplies for the poorer nations like Bangladesh, Pakistan, all those countries who usually depend on those portable ones to live. But right now, I think because EU is going to have a shortage, so they are actually trying to buy it from all over the world.
hmm yeah, it's going to be.
yes, Tyler, can I jump in here, please?
Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to remind us all that really, ever since the beginning, probably very early March, the EU were already warning citizens that they need to really be more careful with usage of energy supplies and so on because of this difficult oil and gas situation. And whether it was just verbalizing that in the media or whatever, it would have put a little bit of the fear of God into everybody. And so starting the process way back then and all the other backscene things happening, including the sanctions along the way, I would be very, very surprised it would be really remiss of the European politicians not to have taken that seriously in the background, and actually for things to be happening right now with rationing, and I'm sure it's been in the press as well, how supplies are going to be curtailed, what plans they have for so on and so forth, because it's highly likely that Russians won't turn back on Nord Stream 1 as much as one would hope, and certainly keep it to the limit that they have. Is it 3 days a week, or had just before the shutdown today? If they reopen it on time, they'll reopen it just for the 3 days as well, and so on. So there must be things in force. Even the Green Party person who is on the leading structure of the EU, he was not joking, I'm quite sure, commenting that with showering and stuff, the idea that the press have been saying, oh, we need to cut back from 10-minute to 5-minute showers. He says, I don't know how long I've had a 5-minute shower. I've not had 5-minute showers for forever, he said. So well, not quite ever, but the fact that he as an individual person has not been taking long showers for a long time, and hopefully other people within the German or European society will realize that this is for real, people. It's a while yet till September. The EU has been strategizing for this difficult winter coming ahead. Hopefully their backroom actions and their other activities that have been happening and regulations being put out will come into force and help the situation. But it's all waiting and seeing. And I think the last thing I want to say just now is that Cheryl has a point in that all the EU is stockpiling, Europe stockpiling, even the UK, except I find that hard to believe, has actually advantaged the European countries more than the Bangladeshis and the other countries in the world, which unfortunately are again taking the brunt of all of this, not especially as they don't have so many emissions anyhow. So it's all an upside down world, always has been, and we haven't even fixed half of it yet. Thank you.
Sure. So the next tweet that I have here is from Phil. Doctors using AI catch breast cancer more often than either does alone. Oh, so doctors together with AI is better than either alone. Oh, that's kind of obvious. And the next is from Matt Hughes with a really weird one. That 20 U.S. companies charged of selling fake Cisco products worth $1 billion. A Miami-based CEO was arrested for allegedly importing $1 billion worth of counterfeit Cisco equipment from China and Hong Kong.
Counterfeit in what way? Secret backdoor chips, right?
I think
No,
this.
they were just fake boxes. He was selling them as Cisco branded Cisco, but they were. But amazing that he was able to do $1 billion in sales. What an amazing, Well, I
Yeah, I
suppose
think
when you're selling something, 50% of the price, that's probably the reason.
yeah, as of yesterday, they had the 20 billion amassed, but then it's leaking back. The story started to unfold that it was sold by 20 U.S. companies. So I think we're trying to figure out what involvement they had in this transaction. Did they manufacture? Did they put a different chipset? We don't know. I mean, and we used to have these problems when I was at Cisco many years ago. I mean, and not uncommon to hardware companies. You would pre-book or you would, to meet a quarterly deadline. But this wouldn't be the first time that Cisco reacted or was in the news relative to concerns about Chinese interference, but that was namely between Cisco, Huawei, and a handful of others. And so I think 4 or 5 years ago, Chuck Robbins, their CEO, um, decided that they we're going to go to battle with Huawei. But this is completely different. This is fraudulent. To Tyler and Nicholas's point, I think this was just manufactured and made to look like it was Cisco. What was refurbished, repurposed, rebranded, we don't know yet, but they definitely got caught. And I think the story will continue to unfold to figure out who knew and who didn't know. But rather big story yesterday.
Yeah. Okay, next.
That is scary considering how much of the infrastructure in this country is based on Cisco product.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tyler,
78%.
Tyler, did you
It's going
ever?
to be known as Disco product.
What's that, Ben?
Tyler, did you ever cover or hear, because I was hearing this in a couple of other rooms, especially like those that are kind of talking about supply chain issues, that the United States is actually starting to do chip production locally, that they're actually doing something in Ohio,
No.
and they're like, it's, I can't find the name of the company, but that they're doing some chip production locally because of what's going on with the supply chain. So I'm just wondering if anyone's found out more deeper information to that, because I'm wondering who's doing it.
There
I
was
don't
a
know.
lot of
I mean,
chatter about onshoring the TSMC business, basically.
yeah,
So
they're
there's
struggling with that. I mean, I think the Cisco, or sorry, not Cisco, but the Intel plant is running into problems, right? That's the only chip plant that's been announced recently, and they've been running into problems in Texas, right?
What kind
to
of
be
problem?
clear, there are
Arizona, I think it's all in Arizona, both TSMC and Intel.
to be
Oh, is
clear
it?
though,
It's in Arizona. Okay.
Arizona, yeah.
There's been chip production in the United States going back to at least 1964 and ongoing. If you go to Wikipedia and look at a list of semiconductor fabrication plants, you'll find there are many dozens in the US. The question is whether there are any bleeding edge ones that work on the small, like 3 nanometer process sizes. That's a different question. But in terms of general chip productions, there's dozens and dozens of facilities in the US and have been for decades. So we must be talking about bleeding edge here.
And Intel is having the factory in Ohio. So, Amy, I think it's Intel.
Okay. So the next tweet I have is from Tomoko, that a pregnant woman says her fetus should count as a passenger in the carpool lane, now that it's considered uh,
in Texas.
a person. Yes, under Texas new abortion law, does a fetus count as a second passenger in the carpool lane?
Oh, that's a good one.
No, it
I believe
doesn't.
she's trying to get out of a $215 ticket from the HOV lane. And
Yes.
her
The only
argument,
question, if she flies anywhere, does she have to pay 2 seats?
Oops.
No, because lap infants are free up till 2 years old.
exactly.
I'm just being
From
technical.
-9 months to 2 years old.
So
Is
the
that in
next,
Texas? Because if it's in Atlanta, I mean, if you look in the HOV lanes, they're in there with sex dolls to get in the HOV lanes.
so
Wow,
the,
where's the emojis for that one?
It was in a movie by Woody Allen. I think it was, I can't remember which one it was. Though he had a sex doll in it, and and also in Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David. But in Indonesia, when I lived in Jakarta for the flotation of PT Telkom, there used to be a rule about going into town that you had to have 2 people in the car, and so there were these kids that would sit on the side of the road called car jockeys, and these car jockeys you just stop, pick one up, and then you go in the HOV lane.
okay. So the next one is from BBC, from Saudamini, that a video game prescribed by doctors to treat ADHD. The game has got regulatory approval to help treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There we go. There we go. I'm going to break out the clap sound for that. That's badass.
That
Let,
might be a question for teachers.
let's make games and apply all of those skills to all kinds of things like that. If the games, or TikTok, a hybrid of, and God help, I mean, if the metaverse can actually do that, if we can somehow fool kids into participating in a metaverse that's actually good for them in some kind of way, that would be fantastic. So, the next one is from Evan, that something called LEO Flight reveals alpha prototype for its a vertical takeoff and landing flying hypercar zooming at speeds of 250 miles an hour. So it's a a new entry into the vertical takeoff and landing flying car race, which is well underway. There's quite a few players in that space. Hyundai and Joby, and there's tons of them. Volocopter, Lilium. So the next is from Dr. Fran. According to Forbes, if you meet a metaverse expert, hide your wallet. Beware of metaverse hype that lacks communities or consumer adoption.
Basically,
Try that again, Dr. Fran.
I don't think we can hear her.
Yep, can't hear. Okay.
There was an outage on Friday here in Canada for the internet services, so me and a few fellow Canadians couldn't make it to the show, but they said it was an update, kind of a critical failure of some sort, but it's for some people, they still don't have internet access, and unfortunately, this particular provider, Rogers, is connected to the debit system here in Canada and a few other things, so it was almost as if we got launched back to the 1970s on Friday. So, yeah, a little news from Canada.
Another one of the dangers of a state-based attack on a system where the technology coheres with the financial field. If you think about how much money was lost because of that outage by merchants, it's a massive threat vector for state-based actors. Now, there was some allegation, although Rogers came out and denied it, but you would of course expect them to come out and deny it, that this was somehow linked to Canada's refusal to return the parts for Nord Stream, part of the infrastructure that the Canadians have been servicing. So part of the Russia sanctions is, of course, that a lot of the machinery that they use needs to be serviced by external nations who are boycotting them or sanctioning them. So there were rumors around some connection.
Or lack thereof. Haha.
Okay. Next up, the Dr. Fran had one that President Biden will reveal the first James Webb Space Telescope image today.
very exciting.
Very, very excited about this. It's going to be amazing, hopefully.
Yeah, one thing to note about scientific images, compared to your normal JPEGs, which may be only a few megabytes, these are uncompressed images, so they range in the gigabytes, which you can't actually make the distinction when you look at it. You have to really get down to the raw data to see the difference in detail, but it's just quite impressive. This is probably the most advanced instrument, and one of the most amazing things about what it can do is do nanometer changes through a mechanical device where each of the mirrors has this positioning, and I think it's something like 7 degrees of freedom, which is quite impressive. So for anyone who wants to take a look at that mechanism, there's also a YouTube video where you can even 3D print that mechanism for yourself for home and get it working, which is quite impressive. So congrats to NASA.
Yeah, just an amazing achievement. But just for everybody to understand who may be not following what's going on, is that this is an infrared camera, as I understand it, and that it will enable us to see farther into the universe than ever we have delved before. So we're looking back in time and proving many things that we only have as mathematical conjecture. So this is really an exciting moment for humanity. So I'm hoping that they're going to have some amazing announcements.
Okay, the next is from Evan that Discord is a firm favorite among young audiences. A big survey was done to find out which messenger and video call service young folks are using in quote unquote the West, and Discord comes way out ahead for young folks
Because
in
it's twinned with gaming. So Discord is a gaming social platform. And so the success of gaming, of course, means that Discord is going to be its preferred user. users and young people.
Oh
Oh
much
yeah, I use
attention
Discord.
has Discord paid to privacy security?
Discord is a hellscape of
Yeah, not
bots.
secure at all, unfortunately. Their two-factor authentication system, I think, was compromised a few months ago, so it still has a way to go before it's a little bit more useful, as it were, professionally speaking, I would say. But the early innovators of the metaverse are all using it, so most of the developers I've interacted with who develop on the metaverse or for the quote-unquote metaverse use Discord.
And all of the serious crypto projects. So we've been only working on Discord forever, but we have very good moderators. So it's all about the quality of your moderators, and your ability to fight spam and bots is a full-time job.
Okay, the Apple Watch that was the upcoming Apple Watch rumors that is called the Apple Watch Pro, which will have a bigger screen, larger battery, an S8 chip, and a body temperature sensor, is now also being rumored to cost $900. And BB found one that iPhone sales are now banned in Colombia over a patent infringement. Ericsson, out of Stockholm, has the patents on 5G technology because they essentially created 5G in large part, and hold a whole lot of the key patents for it that Apple is not paying for. And I remember hearing really interesting stories about that ordeal. And Ericsson has been seeking an iPhone sales ban in multiple countries due to the 5G patent infringements and has now succeeded in obtaining the first in Colombia. So there you go. And that does it for the tweets. Did anyone else have a tweet that we didn't get to? I don't think so. I got through all the tweets today. So we will end it there at the top of the hour. 2 hours of fun headlines. Thank you, everybody, and we'll do it again manana.
Hold on, I think
And
Ben
Ben
can hold
just
the room today. Ben.
Ben just opened the room.
Oh,
So
perfect.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to pin it on top. Hold on, hold on.
yeah,
Sustainable
it's about the
Transport Solutions, number
yeah
11. There it is.
transport
Yep.
solutions.
Tyler,
Yeah.
can you help to pin? Something is wrong with my clubhouse. I can't.
Okay. Can do. Copy. Paste. And there's
Yeah.
Ben's room at the top of this room. Sustainable Transport Solutions, number 11. See y'all over there, everybody.